Hello and welcome to Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on the internet. I am Patrick Knisley.
Hey, my name is Matthew Stoner.
And I'm David Howe.
And we are going to be talking a little bit today about our gaming history, kind of a little bit about ourselves and some of our favorite Nintendo games. And full disclosure, everybody, this is a pre-recorded episode. I mean, all of our episodes are pre-recorded.
They're not live.
They're not live
on Spotify.
But I guess what I mean by that is this is recorded in advance, well enough in advance. This is for a week when we couldn't get together.
This is a bottle episode.
Yeah,
of Super Switch Headz, basically.
So
this is like The Fly from Breaking Bad.
What that means is we're not going to talk about the news and rumors because we don't know what news and rumors are relevant for this week, and we're not going to talk about what we've been playing. So it's just going to be a little bit shorter of an episode, just kind of focused on us, so you can get to know a little bit more about.
Yeah, if you're out there and you have a question, you're like, "Who are those guys?
Yeah, what did they like to play?
Yeah, why?"
This is the Get to Know Us episode.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
that's it.
Also, how does it feel being in the future, guys? It's pretty cool, right?
It's weird.
Yeah. Who knows what's come out or what's happened in the news? It's a wacky world now. We can only imagine.
So what we're going to do is we're going to just go around the table and give a 5-minute sort of history of how we got into video games, what kind of systems we grew up with, and sort of how we got to where we are now, doing this Switch podcast. So anybody feel like they want to go first or not go first? I'm happy to go.
I can go first.
Go for it.
Matthew.
The very first console that I had an Intellivision, Mattel Intellivision.
For real?
Yeah, totally.
I thought that was a bit that you put in the notes.
No, that's not a bit. The controller looks like a television remote, and I think it had like 10 buttons on it or something. And I remember playing bowling growing up.
Did you have older siblings?
Yeah. I have 3 older siblings.
So I feel like that plays into what your first console is somewhat.
If you don't mind me asking, also, what year were you born?
83.
83. Right.
Yeah. So probably before owning an NES, had a Mattel Intellivision, I don't know, maybe like 85 to 87, 88. When did NES come out?
85.
Was it really?
I think so. Yeah, in the States,
I've
right?
got it listed here as...
Maybe it was 83.
It was 85.
85.
In the States. It came out earlier in Japan.
Right, yeah.
My very first memory of playing any game is bowling on Intellivision.
Wow.
What about y'all's? Do you remember y'all's first? Very first game.
I can't say I do.
Yeah, I think it's either one of two, and I'll get to that in my Nintendo story.
Wait,
but
you don't remember your first?
No, I do. It was either, so my first system was a Super Nintendo. I got that when I was 2 years old because I was born in '88, so I'm a little bit younger than you. But so that was the first game I remember playing. But it was either that or Donkey Kong on my dad's Apple II. My dad did have an Apple II. It had a version of Donkey Kong on it, and I just can't remember if I played that first or not. But I remember I only remember ethereal moments from this time in my life anyway. So I just remember being in a closet. I remember there's a lot of orange, like wood paneling or something like that. And I remember fucking playing Donkey Kong and being like, what is this? And my dad's like, that's a video game. That's the best video game of all time. And then I just was hooked.
Well, Matt, continue then. So you had the Intellivision?
Yeah, I had an Intellivision. I have a long laundry list of consoles that I've had. Runs the gamut of NES. Had a Game Boy. My brother, growing up, we spent a lot of time in the hospital through some health stuff. So like video games, owning a Game Boy is like such an important console for me because I would play with my brothers and we would fight over who was playing Tetris.
And you just had one?
We just had one. Yeah. And we had all of those peripherals. Oh, like all the crazy Frankenstein.
The magnifying glass on top of another magnifying glass.
We never had a light.
I had a light and a magnifying glass.
Yeah, we had speakers.
I definitely had the little wormy, squirrely light that would come out from the side.
Nice.
That was really nice.
I think mine was similar.
And then I spent a lot of time in arcades. So I love going to arcades now as an adult. But my memories...
It's so different now. They're all gimmicky games.
They're all like... It's so funny. I almost dropped a name of like an arcade brand, which is Raw Thrills, which means nothing to most people.
Yeah.
But they just manufacture arcade machines, and they also create the software for arcades.
Right.
Which is pretty unusual because usually it would be like Nintendo and Midway who would make an arcade game, or like Bally and like a Twilight Zone pinball machine. But now Raw Thrills makes like every shooter game that you've ever played. And they play
Like the Time Crisis games or stuff like that?
that's Namco.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, quiz me, guys. I got it.
So you're the arcade expert.
Yeah,
on this
man.
podcast, for sure.
I just have a lot of memories playing arcades.
Yeah.
And that's
Dying out, man. It's very sad.
Yeah.
I think like an arcade opened recently here in Austin, or they like kind of turned a performance space, and this is dating the podcast, but they recently turned a performance space into an arcade, and I was just like, why?
Yeah.
It's like, you guys understand. Not that I'm against it.
Oh,
It's
no,
great.
yeah.
I love an arcade, but it's like, it's so rare to find one. You know what I mean? Like, they're clearly not good for business. I remember when I moved to Austin, like before I moved here, I visited and kind of checked it out, and I went on the drag and I saw Einstein's Arcade.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
Einstein's.
hell yeah, this is great. I can't wait. And then by the time I had moved to
gone.
Austin, it had closed.
Where did you grow up, Matthew?
Ohio.
Okay. Gotcha.
Small town Ohio. Spent a lot of time in the shopping mall and the arcade in the mall.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, go on then, Matthew.
Owned an NES. Fought with my brothers playing Kid Icarus. I still have never beat Kid Icarus.
It's a hard game.
It's so hard. Had a Super NES, Sega Genesis, 64, PlayStation 1. I mean, I could list them
and
all.
you were like pretty
I'm a fucking
consistently
nerd.
into the
You're
games.
a fucking gamer, bro.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the N64 came out around when I was 15, 16, so you would have been a little bit younger than
Like
me.
96, right?
But were you still into games like in high school and in college?
throughout.
Yeah.
There was only a time that I've never been into games, which was like, 1 or 2 years when I was started dating.
Like an
It was
early
a-
mating period.
Yeah. When I was mating, when I was trying to find a mate, and I was embarrassed by games.
Yeah. I had a brief moment of that.
You
as
know
well.
what that's like?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have a moment where you're just like, who am I?
Yeah.
I like games. I'm a gamer.
Yeah.
I am only as good as I am attractive to others.
Right. Well, like accepting the things you're into, I think. I'll talk about that more too. but
Man,
yeah.
this is already a heavy episode. I love it.
Going into like more details,
Yeah.
like the bigger memories that I have about gaming is spending a lot of time in arcades, but I think it was September 9th, 1999.
Wow.
Sega Dreamcast came out.
Yes, Queen.
And I saved up all my cash to buy it from a KV Toys. And I
dude.
brought it home, had a internet browser and a demo disc.
Yeah.
And that was it.
It didn't come with a pack-in game?
I don't think it.
Wow.
Maybe a demo.
A demo disc is like 10 small games.
Yeah, that's true. It has a demo disc.
Man, Dreamcast was one hell of a goddamn system.
There's so many good games on there.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the best systems of all. That's in like the top 3, I think, for
Really?
me. Like that system was out for like, 11 months before they announced it was going to die or something like that?
It was pretty short.
It was really short, maybe longer than that, but it felt like that. But in that time, it had just hundreds of games. I would say at least 30 are great. Like really, really great games in such a short amount of time. Like reminds me of the Beatles. It's like the Beatles were around for like 7 years as a band. They put out like 20 albums. Like
Involved so much. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's such a great system.
So, like at the end of every episode, when we talk about like what games are you playing, the reason why I always are playing other non-Switch games is because I'm just like I'm very agnostic.
Yeah,
in
that's
that
good.
regard, I just like playing all games, and because that's my history. What about y'all? I don't want to take up too much of the time.
Sure, yeah, I'll go. I was born a little bit after you, and I'm also the oldest kid. So my kind of
You didn't inherit any systems.
right, yeah. Like we had the Apple II, and that's the oldest thing that I ever played games on. Like at the time, I bought an NES later, but like the Super Nintendo came out like early 1991 when I was 2, right? Or maybe it was late, but either way, I was 2 years old when the Super Nintendo came out. And my dad has always been a big like pilot guy. He's like a big vehicle guy. He likes doing stuff with his hands. He's very tactile. So he flocked to video games, I think, kind of early as an adult. I don't know that he owned an NES or anything like that, but I think as soon as I was born, he was like, "Ooh, this looks fucking fun." You know what I mean? And like, let's do something I can do with my kid, and like, you know, kind of like what you're doing with your kid, Patrick. And it's like, and so when I was 2, I remember my earliest real memory that I can really remember was playing Super Mario Brothers, and I'm like in a diaper or some shit. I have very strange, like I don't remember a lot of my life, but I remember very little things, and this is one of them. And it's like
memory doesn't form really well before the age 4, so
right. It's very nebulous, right? Yeah. But there are moments that stick out, and one is like I'm playing Super Mario World. I remember distinctly it's on like the second level or something like that. The one where there's a bunch of water and the kind of floaty platforms, and there's that, you know, there's like kind of fish, but it's not like the part where the fish kill you. You know, it's still early on in the game. And I remember I just kept dying over and over again. And
sounds
I was
right
like,
for a 2-year-old.
Yeah, because I was 2 fucking years old, right? And I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't barely even speak, and I just remember like just like bawling my eyes out because I kept dying and I couldn't beat this level, but I kept trying over and over again. I remember distinctly my mom being like, "David, stop playing. Like, you're not having fun." And I'm being like, "I am having fun," and just continuing to fucking play. And that was like, I think that really shaped a lot of my ideology when it came to video games, still to this day. Like, you know, I was recently playing Super Mario Brothers Lost Levels, and it's like, that game is so fucking punishing, and it's hard. Yeah, and it's like just early on I found pleasure in pain, and and that's kind of I think where a lot of that came from. But that's kind of where I started, you know, was in the Nintendo sphere of things. You know, of course I played a lot of the arcade games, like the CC's Pizza games. This is back like the Super Nintendo days. This was back when I was living in North Carolina before I moved to Texas.
Okay,
and it's like, yeah, I you know, and I had a younger brother too, who was 2.5 years younger than me. So there's a lot of kind of 2-player stuff, me showing him stuff that I liked. But definitely, yeah, I started with that kind of stuff, you know, moved on from Super Mario World, but still to this day, I think is a perfect game and one of the best games of all time. And it's the first game I ever played, still, I think my favorite game. And you know, that moved me on to like Donkey Kong Country and like other sorts of platformers. I loved those games. I loved the whole jungle vibe. And I was like, oh man, you can do so much stuff with tone and graphics and all this kind of stuff I'd never really seen before, but it still has that base game feel of like the Super Mario Brothers games, you know. And of course, eventually from garage sales or whatever, we end up getting an NES with like 20 something games. So I kind of got it. I played my NES games afterwards, you know, when I was more like 8 or 9, you know. I was already older and I was already kind of playing new games, you know. The N64 was probably already on the horizon when I was playing NES games for the first time, right? But I still loved them, you know. We would play them all the time. We actually had a Rob robotic operating buddy.
Oh, nice.
And my parents like gave it away in a tax return thing, like tax buyback.
What
stuff.
Did Rob do? It just like picked up rings.
Really.
Yeah, he worked with 2 games. One of them I forget. The other one was Gyromite, which is a game that we had that came with Rob, and it was like basically he would like pick up like rings and put them on little spinny tops, and the tops would press buttons. So it's like, it would be a weird way of an AI companion, basically, but it's like physically moving things to press one button. Like, it was very bizarre. We gave it away, and that's one of the biggest sadnesses of my entire life. Like, I remind my parents all the time that I'm upset about that. But, you know, I was still young at this point. You know, I also got into the Game Boy thing. I remember distinctly getting the Game Boy for the first time, playing Tetris. I was like in driveway of my parents' house in North Carolina, and one of my neighbors that was like an adult walked by, and I was like, "Look, I got a Game Boy!" I was just so proud of it, you know. And like, you know, got way into Pokemon when I was a kid. I think that like Pokemon hit me. Like, I am the generation that grew up with Pokemon.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
and like,
you are.
And like, you know, I played the shit out of the card game and all that kind of stuff. I watched the show and I did all that kind of stuff. So when the Game Boy came out, that was a lot of what I played. And I have distinct memories of like trading with friends and the, you know, on the playground, like what they talk about. Like, that was my history, you know?
Yeah, I missed Pokemon. I'm a little bit older than Matt, so it was when it came out. I didn't think I even paid attention to it. It was like for younger kids, right, you know what I mean? Like, I'm playing shooters.
I have a cousin,
you know what I mean? Like,
I have a cousin who lives in Wales who's like, I'd only see him every couple of years, right, at family reunions and stuff. But he was probably 6 years older than me, right, or maybe 7 years older than me. And I just remember being blown away that he liked Pokemon.
Nice,
He's like, I was just like, trading with my friends. And it's like, whoa, that's really cool. I also
somebody who knew themselves early enough.
Yeah. I also spoiled all of episode 1 for that guy on that same family trip, and I felt really bad. I still feel bad about that. But
Star Wars episode?
Yeah. He hadn't seen it. He hadn't seen
bad
it
about spoiling a shitty movie.
Well, hey man, I actually watched that movie the other day, and I think it holds up. Anyway,
I mean, it gave us Duel of the Fates. It's a great song.
Oh man, best soundtrack, I think, best score out
good.
of all the Star Wars movies. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Let me see. Just kind of moving through it, kind of moved on, got an N64. I think it was technically my brother's N64. He was way into kind of racing games. So our first game was Cruis'n USA. And,
Cruis'n USA is great.
And honestly, I think my dad being a pilot also inspired a lot of those early games that I played. I'm a huge Pilot Wings fan. If you've listened to this podcast, you probably know that. Like, Star Fox I blame my dad teaching me how to play Star Fox for why I always have to invert the Y-axis in first-person shooter games. You know what I mean? Because I was like, but it makes sense when you press up to go up. He's like, that's not how it works in a plane.
Doesn't really make sense.
So to this day, I use inverted Y-axis. But games like that, those are very inspirational. I dabbled with the PS1. Got that way later after the N64 came out. Kind of almost like the year before the PS2 came out. We got like a budget PS1. I kind of slammed a bunch of RPGs. That's kind of when I played Chrono Trigger for the first time, and like Chrono Cross and a lot of those Final Fantasy games. And I think the reason that I have issues completing RPGs to this day is because I have PTSD from when my brother deleted my Chrono Trigger save file.
No shit.
Yeah. It was an accident. I mean, he didn't do it on purpose, but man, I was like, have you guys ever had a save file deleted like that?
Yes.
It's heartbreaking. Like, I put 35, 40 hours into that game.
I played Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah.
And my buddy Mike deleted my save file from my PS1 memory card. Was that PS1? Yeah, it's PS1.
Mike.
Yeah, they had memory cards. I remember those.
Wow.
That's what happened because I played Chrono Trigger on PlayStation. Like on the one that came with Final Fantasy VI.
Chronicles.
Yeah, exactly.
Final Fantasy Chronicles.
Yeah. And so I played that version, and it got deleted. I guess he removed it or something while it was saving on another game, and the whole card got corrupted.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, to this day, it's like hard for me to. I beat Final Fantasy IX recently, which was like a good feeling, but it's like I think that's kind of what turned me kind of off of that whole thing, and that's kind of why I've stuck with platformers for a lot of my history. But I mean, other than that, I kind of just go through this quick. I wrote down a couple notes. GameCube, whenever that came out, I was a huge like Rogue Squadron fan. Like the Star Wars games on Super Nintendo and GameCube and N64 were so good.
Do you remember, was it Rogue Squadron 1 or 2 where they had the Naboo fighter as a secret unlockable?
That was 1.
That was 1.
Yeah. That was in the first one. Yeah, because it was about around 99 whenever that came.
That makes sense. Hey, Patrick, we're talking about episode 1 again.
We'll talk about Star Wars. That's
I'm not
fine.
that angry about it. I just don't think it's...
You're fuming, dude. You got thoughts coming out of yours. But yeah, I played so much on that. That's where I first really played Smash. I played Melee. I think that's the one I really sunk the most time into before 64. I never really had 64 as part of my life. And then kind of, I played a lot of games on the GameCube, but I'm going to kind of move on. Whenever the Wii was about to come out, this is when I was kind of like really coming into my own as like a Nintendo fanboy. Like the hype cycle was kind of becoming a thing, the internet was out by this point in 2006, right? And, I actually made a trailer at my high school for the Wii before it came out. It was like kind of where I learned that I wanted to be a filmmaker, because I worked for the broadcast club at school or whatever. We would do the video announcements and skits every day, and I made this trailer for the Wii, and I remember being there editing it until like 9 at night. I like stayed way late, and I was like, oh man, this is fucking fun. I love making movies. And it's like, and it was just us just getting hyped, going to GameStop, like making up a bunch of shit, and I think that's kind of when my fanboyism kind of took over. I feel like that's probably the seed of like, oh, I want to start making things related to my hobbies, not just have them as hobbies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the seed for something like this, and, And yeah, so that's also during the Wii time. That's kind of where I first got into like modding consoles, and like I had a hacked Wii, and I kind of had my Wii going into college, and I was hella poor, but still wanted to play a bunch of games, so it was like kind of learning how to do that, and kind of borrowing games from friends and ripping them. It's not entirely legal, but it's like, it's that kind of, you can't, once you kind of pop, you can't stop. Another game I really played a ton of during this time was a mod for Brawl called Brawl Minus. You guys ever play that game?
No.
It's incredible. Because there's this like mod for Brawl called Brawl Plus, which just removed a bunch of the bullshit from Brawl for the most part.
Okay.
You can remove tripping and like it balanced out a lot of the characters and stuff like that. Brawl Minus basically took that balance and then just made everybody super powered. Right? So everybody was just OP, but it was still balanced. That game is incredible. I got to pull out my modded Wii so we can play that game.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Because that's where Project M spawned from, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think Brawl Plus came first, and then Brawl Minus and Project M came out of that. Like Project M was like, cool, that's great, but we have a bunch of people who would just rather play Melee with all these new characters. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was all during that time. That was kind of the glory age of honestly Nintendo modding. But that a lot of ROM hacks of stuff like that. I feel like this kind of was first getting into the scene of like creative people making video games. This is when I was playing indie games, and kind of stepping outside of the norm of what video games can be. And I think that kind of opened me up a lot. And yeah, and to this day, I've remained a Nintendo fan. I fucking owned a Wii U, motherfuckers. So there's that.
There you go.
I was an ambassador on the 3DS, so I got those GBA games. And then I'm going to just fast forward and say now I host the Switch podcast.
My favorite mod for Wii U, Smash 4. Is that Smash 4?
Yeah.
On Wii U is made every character Krusty Krab.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've not played that.
Oh, it's great.
We just need to have just like a hacking day.
Yeah, that's all. I can't mod my Wii U anymore because I upgraded.
Yeah.
And there's no available hacks for it.
Right.
Anyway, it's just fun.
Someday I'll hack my Wii. I mean my Switch. Someday I'll hack my
When
Switch.
you get a new one, maybe when the Pro comes
Patrick,
out or whatever.
tell us your origin story.
Yeah, so I was born in 81. So the NES came out not too long after that, but I didn't have one, but everybody I knew did, and I played at friends' houses, and that's when you're like, what's your first memory? I'm like, I don't know. It's probably just playing at a friend's house, but I don't remember which one or where, but it's probably like, Mario Brothers. I also had a friend, like a family friend, hey, Mark Raup, if you're listening, who I would go to his house a lot, and they had like either an Atari or a Magnavox. Like they had every video game and played on PC a lot. And I remember playing Apple II games with like my cousins at their house. So somewhere along those lines was my first gaming experience. I had a Game & Watch as a kid too.
Yeah.
Or at least one, maybe two. I don't remember.
I remember you bringing that up before.
Yeah. And then I had a Game Boy first, I think. Like I had a Game Boy, and I would play it a lot at my older brother's soccer tournaments and stuff. Like that's where I remember playing the Game Boy. And when I was, not too long after the Super Nintendo came out, we got one. But around the same time, we also got a nice home computer, and so that's when I heavy got into gaming. And I would have probably been 10-ish, give or take, around that time. Mm-hmm. And so I started playing tons of games on PC.
Like Blizzard games or.
I played, like, I talked about this before, a lot of these Sierra online games. Right. They were like sort of like point and click games, but the early ones weren't even point and click. They were like you type in your command.
What, are these like DOS games you're talking about?
Yeah, they were all DOS games. Anyway, I was really got really into the Super Nintendo, and like my parents bought it for us with like 5 games. They got us like whatever Christmas that was or whatever, but it was for like all of us, but I became the gamer. Like I have older siblings, but they played a little bit when we were younger, but not really, not as much as me. And then when I was like 16, I had one of my first jobs. I worked at Home Video, or not Home Video. What was it? What's the one called? Hollywood Video. Yeah. There was also a Home Video in Austin. So
Hollywood Video had that game area. It was called Game Crazy.
Yeah.
You're right.
You could rent like consoles from them and stuff. But anyway, I saved up money from working at Hollywood Video to buy an N64. And I was super into the Final Fantasy games, like on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
And so then when I found out Final Fantasy VII was going to be a PlayStation exclusive, I had to save up to buy a PlayStation.
So you kept both.
I bought both right at the same time because I was like, because it was like they'd been out for a little while because I think the PlayStation came out first. But anyway, like so I was like, I'm getting my N64 because I knew Nintendo, you know. And it's like, what, Final Fantasy VII? I'm like, guess I'll get this other thing too.
Yeah.
And then I think like kind of like what we were talking about, I got really into like partying in high school, and I still played video games, but I kind of stopped following them. And when I was in college, I just played what I already had with some of my roommates, and you know what I mean. I didn't.
Did you bring like your N64 to college?
Yeah, actually, I don't know that I did, but my roommates had theirs. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I just stopped kind of following it and just kind of played old games. And I had a roommate in college briefly that bought an Xbox when it first came out because I was in college then, and played some of that. And when I moved back to Austin after college, I moved in with a friend who bought an Xbox. So we played a lot, like Halo 2 and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I bought a PlayStation 2 around that time to play mostly Final Fantasy 11, the online one.
Oh, really?
And
so you had the PS2 modem and all that.
Yeah.
I used that for Tony Hawk.
PS2 with the hard drive too, because I had to have the hard drive. So I kind of stopped playing games for a while there. I mean, I played them off and on always, but, and then I got married, and to like save, to make some money for our wedding, I sold all my old consoles, which I don't regret, but,
I regret on your behalf.
I sold all of them. And I was like, I'm, you know, it's kind of almost not like a symbolic, I'm not really playing these, you know,
I am no longer a boy.
And then like, I kind of not regretted, but it's like, I kind of want like something now. And so I got like an Xbox 360 real late in the life cycle and got really into Skyrim and a bunch of games. And I was really getting back into gaming. And then my kid was born, and I just kind of didn't have the same amount of time. And then I saw David when we were doing a show at the theater, Fallout Theater, shout out to Fallout, or formerly known as at that time. This was like 2017, and David was playing his Switch.
I was playing Sonic. I was playing Sonic Mania.
I had bought an Xbox One and wasn't playing it that much, and I saw you playing that, and I was like, "Man, fuck that! You can. That's what I need. Like, you can play that wherever." And so
it was like the commercials.
It really was. It worked on me, and I went out and got a Switch not too long after.
I like that you hear about a thing and you see the thing, and you're like, "I need that thing."
Yeah, it's one of your best qualities.
Yeah. And you get the thing. You accomplish your task and your goals and your objectives.
And so I've been really hardcore into the Switch since then. And like, I just don't, not like kind of what you talked about too. Like there was a period of time like in college and stuff. It wasn't like I was shunning being a gamer, but it's like at some point when I got married, I was like, I'm going to accept the things I like. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I got back into like buying and playing with Lego sets and like playing video games and just like reading more comic books again. These are the things I like. I don't need to prove to anybody. My wife doesn't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially once you're married. It's like, fuck it, man. But it's, I had that too, you know, it's like, I was in, a couple like weird relationships and like they were good and I felt like I was myself, but they didn't necessarily go how I thought they would. And, kind of felt a little burned by some of that. And I felt like that's when I kind of started really trying the dating game of actually going out and meeting people and stuff. And that's where you're like, oh, well, I got to make sure I like look right and I want to act the right way. And I kind of don't want to like fuck this up too early.
And you're spending a lot of time going out. Too.
Right. But I mean, just specifically for me, it felt like there was a bit where I was kind of hiding that part of myself, and it's like, and I remember having like a conscious moment, like when I was kind of later in my college years or just out of it, where I was kind of going through a lot of life change where it's like, man, why should I hide or be ashamed of the things that have, like my development as a person, like is intertwined with the development and the life of video games, like I've been playing video games since before I was able to read. It's like, it's part of who I am, and it's like, and not just that, but it's, I love fucking watching extended editions of the Lord of the Rings movies, like you just got to find you a girl who likes that.
Well, and video games are newer media, and like, just like when we were young, people talked about TV being bad for you and rotting your brain and you shouldn't watch TV. Now it's pretty accepted that a lot of people just go home and watch TV and that's all they do and there's no big deal.
Yeah. So much content.
But
you can do that in the White House.
Video games are becoming like that where like everybody now has grown up with it more and it's more acceptable.
See, when we're like, pretty soon we're going to have presidents who, instead of just watching Fox News in the White House, they're going to be playing like
Call of Duty
in the White House, like Frank Underwood.
Oh boy.
Well,
Is that a PS Vita?
Yeah, I was gonna say to like growing up. You're right. Like I was thinking back, like all of my social events were about video games. Friends brought Xboxes to like churches, and we'd play on the giant screens and play Halo 1.
That's dope. God would like that.
God would be super.
Yeah, he'd be way into that.
Super fan. Would not be fans of the names that we chose for our characters, but he would be fans that we were all together. And like even N64 era, I was a huge wrestling fan, so we played WCW versus NWO World Tour.
Yeah,
which holds up pretty well. I played it this week.
I played those games before I even really knew what wrestling was.
Yeah, they're super fun. Yeah. And my friends and we had a bracket, and so even in this time where I like forgot about games or was ashamed that I played games, like I thought about like, oh, I started playing games with my family, with my brothers and my sister. And then throughout high school, I played Counter-Strike on my high school computers. And then on the weekends, I'd play wrestling games with my friends. It's like, oh, gaming is like my social thing that like connects all of these people.
Play is intrinsic to the human experience. Like throughout all of history, like human beings play for different reasons, right? I've read articles on this
too. Yeah,
like mammals do.
It's part
right?
of learning.
I'm a mammal.
Yeah. It's learning. It's exercise, if not for your body, then for your brain. It's social. It's competition is what drives us forward. You know what I mean? Even if it's against a computer, it's like that kind of challenge for yourself is kind of like what makes us human. I think, and you touched on something there a little earlier too, Patrick, that like every form of media takes a while to become established as a boulder of media or a pillar of media. You know what I mean? It's like, like film, was nothing for a long time. It was just,
it's shitty theater.
Exactly.
Like,
shitty theater or TV is shitty film.
Yeah,
or,
exactly.
And video games are just for kids. And it's like, clearly now we're out of that time and we have been for a while, but it's just, I think it's interesting I think it's kind of fortunate that we were able to grow up with this platform, you know what I mean? In this medium. And it's like, and seeing it go through its permutations, I kind of feel the same way about the internet, Right. And it's like, and I think it's cool to be there. Like, it'd be cool to live throughout the birth and the history of all of cinema. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a cool time to be alive.
Well, we should wrap this up pretty soon. I wanted to kind of quickly throw out some of our favorite Nintendo games, and we can use that to discuss those things a little bit. I'll go first since I'm talking. So from the Super Nintendo days, we talked about this. Super Mario World is just one of the best games ever. I spent so much time playing that. I also played a shit ton of Link to the Past. I remember just loving that game. I'm like thinking back on it too. Like, I don't know how I beat some of those games. Like, I remember being at like a friend's house where his little brother was like playing one of the dungeons in Link to the Past, and was like, how do I do this? And I'm like, I know, here, I'll help you. But it's like, I didn't have anybody to help me,
Right. You're just a wunderkind.
Yeah, I don't know. Lots of people beat the game. I'm not trying to claim anything.
To this day, Patrick Knightley,
the only one who ever finished Link to the Past. And then in N64, I had a shit ton of fun playing GoldenEye with my friends.
Sure.
Like, I was the one that had it, so I could just fucking clean up, just dance circles around them, just shooting that stuff.
Slappers only, dude.
Yeah, that would give them a chance, maybe.
Play Odd Job. Nobody can hit you.
and then just recently, Breath of the Wild for me is one of the best Nintendo games ever. Sort of non-Nintendo games. Quick shout out, like Street Fighter 2 was a big game. You talked about arcades. I kind of forgot about how much time I spent at the arcades. And then those Sierra games were big, influential for me, and also Final Fantasy games growing up too. Those would be some of my favorite games.
What's that?
Nintendo
Sierra games like King's Quest?
Yeah, King's Quest, Police Quest, Space Quest. There were more too.
Quest.
Heroes Quest. I think those are all the Quest ones. But
you guys ever played Magic Mountain?
No.
It was a fun fucking PC game. There's a lot of old school PC games.
Is that a Quest game?
Nah, I don't even know. But for me, I'd go with, similar for me, Super Mario World, absolutely influential for the entirety of my life. Been a Tetris fan since I could understand what Tetris was. I still play to this day, just pretty much as I always have. It's funny you were talking about Zelda: Link to the Past. My first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time in 1998, and that's after that. That's when I went back and played Link to the Past, and then I went and played Link's Awakening it was the Link's Awakening DX for Game Boy Color. One game that I didn't talk about that was bigly impactful for my childhood life was Aladdin for the Super Nintendo.
I remember that game.
That Capcom game. That game was tight.
That was good.
I have so many. It's really hard. You were like, "What are your favorite games?"
Yeah,
I don't know how to answer that.
I don't. I hate that question too. So that's why I was like, let's keep it just favorite games, not like 3 favorite or one favorite.
I will echo what you were saying though about Breath of the Wild, man. Like, I don't know if Breath of the Wild is necessarily one of my favorite games. Like top 10 or whatever.
Right,
I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I will say that I got the same feeling playing that game than when I played Ocarina of Time for the first time.
Yeah.
That just like massive, like I felt like a child, and that's like that childlike wonder I've not felt from any other game other than Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild, really,
Man, there's so many good games.
Yeah,
I don't even know where to start. The first game that came to mind when coming up with this list, it was like Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
Because I spent a lot of time at the arcades, my mom would give me $20 and I would just like hang out at the arcade for a couple of hours. But when the N64 came out, my mom would drop me off at a Toys R Us, and I would sit. They had like maybe 8 N64s, and I would play Super Mario 64 for hours,
just on the like kiosk.
Just on
I would do that at McDonald's.
Yeah, super fun. So I have so many memories of my mom getting pissed at me, being like, "Hey, stop playing Mario 64." I couldn't. Non-Nintendo game Chrono Trigger. It's just like an incredible experience, great story.
Yeah.
And then, man, Breath of the Wild. I
Getting some love.
It's just
on this filler app.
So made me feel like I was a kid again.
Yeah.
Just like exploring the world, singing a mountain, climbing it, the music, subtle piano. Just like,
it's so subtle. That music.
Breath of the Wild 2 is just gonna disappoint so bad.
Oh no, I hope not. Don't say that. I hope it's the opposite.
We just love the first one so much.
It'll be hard to top it.
It's gonna be hard to top.
It'll be really hard.
I'll do it, maybe. I don't know. If you've played Breath of the Wild 2 and you're listening to this, let us know if it's disappointing or not.
How's the future?
Well, yeah, we should wrap it up. Good talk. Hopefully, y'all all know a little bit more about our gaming history, where we're coming from, why we're doing this. And if any of that sparks anything, shoot us a message and let us know your thoughts about your favorite games or your history.
And never be ashamed of what you like.
This is like the positive message.
Yeah,
here.
Seriously, the takeaway from this talk for me is like, just
be yourself.
Yeah, your hobbies don't define you, and yet they can be who you are in different ways. You know what I mean? And it's like, and to shun it, is like shunning a part of yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like, just fucking roll with it, man. That's my message.
Yeah, be yourself.
And with that, we'll say thank you to Corduroy for doing the music. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to find us, you can find us as Switch Headz on Twitter. Mm-hmm. Email us superswitchheadz@gmail. I am Patrick. I am PDYX on Twitter and other places.
Hey, I am Matthew on Twitter, MATHYOU.
And I'm Monolith Fiji on pretty much everything. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll have a normal episode next week. Goodbye.